Welcome into another edition of Let's Talk on this beautiful week. Coming up, we'll have a whole lot more to say about the weather that we did have in a few days ago. Oh, my goodness. Mother Nature shut down the country, and, of course, Nashville was no exception. Thank you. We're live on YouTube and, of course, our podcast. Brand new for a lot of our listeners, but thank you for still joining us, bringing you the issues that affect you not only here in Nashville, Middle Tennessee, but around the state and then around the world. And then, of course, we want to deal with the issues that are happening here in Nashville. All month long, we're dealing with our city leaders. Of course, we started off with the mayor, the new mayor, Freddie O'Connell. Went from there to the director chief of the Metro Fire Department, and that is, of course, Chief Swan, William Swan. Great show. Coming up, we'll be talking to the police chief of Metro Nashville, and that is Metro Police Chief John Drake. But right now, something that's special for all of us, our children, our grandchildren, our tomorrow's leaders. Our topic of conversation has to do with incarceration versus rehabilitation. Who better can talk about that than our favorite judge, Metro Juvenile Court Judge Sheila Calloway? And I haven't seen you this year, so Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Ernie. I'm excited about being here with you. This is a new format, but I'm getting used to it. And, you know, I'm going to listen to you whatever format you're on because you're my favorite radio host. The hardest working man on radio.
James Brown. Also, we have Metro Juvenile Court Clerk Lionel Matthews.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Say that right?
You got it right.
All right.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for being here, sir.
I'm happy to be here. Excited to be here.
Yes, so we want to find out all about the juvenile justice system. Let me begin by saying, of course, leading the way with Calloway was a campaign promise, and that was what, 9-10 years ago?
Yeah, it was about 10 years ago. I campaigned in 2013 and won the election in 2014. So literally, I've been on the bench as the elected judge for 10 years.
Yeah, and re-elected for another 8-year term.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
So I'll be here at least to 2030.
Woo. How long you been a juvenile court clerk?
5 years, going on 6 this year.
All right.
So, yeah, I've been there since 2018.
Right. Let's talk about what's going on inside the system. When someone having issues, whether it's child support or custody, they first need to come see you before we get to the judge.
Yes. So my office is, I like to call my office the nervous system of the court system, juvenile court system. So where we take care of all legal documents. That means any petitions that are filed, any motions that are filed to make sure that your case or your conflict could go before a judicial officer, whether that's a judge or a magistrate at the court. We staff each courtroom with the clerk to keep a record of what happens in court. We process all orders that come from our judicial officers to make sure that everyone that is party to that case knows what is ordered, know what they have to do after going before a judge or a magistrate. And we process that as the administrators of court.
Did you put any new rules or regulations in place to help the people coming to juvenile court?
We don't set rules, so Judge Calloway gets to set the rules for the court. But when
like you must show your ID, obviously.
Yes. Well, in terms of just processing at our office, when you're coming to file anything in our office, you have to have your ID. You want to make sure that, and something that comes up all the time, if you're going to come to court, you want to make sure that you know the address of the other parent because they have to have process served, and they have to be served to come to court also. And if we can't serve them, then the judicial officer may not hear your case because that other party's not there. So that's important. We don't have locator services, or we can't find people for you.
Right.
But we can use the last address in our system if you had a previous case. But if it doesn't get served at that address, if it's an old address or it's a bad address, then you're almost throwing away money to have something served because you'll have to pay for another service if you have to change the address and have it go out again.
So you're the one that send the cases to a magistrate?
Yes.
And then if I go to a magistrate and I don't like the outcome, then I can appeal and come to the judge.
Yes. Absolutely.
Is that process working well?
It works well. The Tennessee legislature last year changed the law and made a determination that if you are in front of one of the magistrates and you're unhappy with your decision, you can ask me for review. Previously, if you asked for it, you got it, and I'd have to do the whole case all over again. But they changed that, and they said that you have to specifically say what it is that you don't agree with and why you think that magistrate was wrong, and then I can make that determination just on that simple port. And so for me, I'm freeing up a little more time for me to hear some of the more serious cases.
So it's not in all cases.
Not in all cases will you get a review. You can ask for one, and I can determine whether or not one of the magistrates made a mistake. And if they did, then I will review it.
So the magistrate will set how much it costs for your child support or your custody right.
Absolutely. So our magistrates hear almost every case that comes through the court system first. And so that is whether it's a child custody case and there's a determination on who should be the primary residential parent or who should be the alternate residential parent and how much time each parent should spend with the child. The magistrate hears that. And then for the alternate residential parent, how much child support that parent should pay. The magistrates hear all of those decisions. They also determine cases where a parent has been accused of neglecting or abusing their child. They'll hear that as well. They'll make a determination of, yes, this parent has abused his child or they haven't. And if they have, what should happen to that child, whether that child should go back to the parent or whether that child should go to family or friends or whether that child should be placed in the Department of Children's Services custody.
Can a child testify in court?
A child can, depending on their age, a child can testify in the court. So if they're over 12, they can always testify if they want to. Under 12, it depends on what they're going to testify about.
Well, I don't want to live with Dad because he doesn't give me any dessert at night. I want to stay with Mom.
We get those a lot.
That's something light, but you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely. We do get those. Like, there's a lot of times that a child will want to testify and say, I get to do more stuff at this parent's house versus that parent's house. And those are things just because they want to do it, doesn't mean that that's what we're going to do. There's about a list of 16 things that we look at to determine whether or not a parent should have custody or should be the primary registered parent or not. One of the things that, and they're all kind of ranked by themselves, but the child's preference, if they're over 12, is one of those things that we consider. That doesn't mean that's what we're going to do, but we can consider that. I will say for people that listen, for me, one of the biggest things that makes a difference is the other parent's willingness to co-parent with the other parent. And so if we have a lot of parents that come in and will do whatever they can to make sure that their other parent doesn't have any rights or doesn't get to see that child at all, and they'll make it really difficult. That's a factor that we look at. And if you're making it harder for your child to spend time with their other parent, then that makes it harder on you in court.
But you automatically, if you're paying child support, get visitation rights.
So child support and visitation are two separate things, and they aren't dependent on one another.
So I have to go to you, Brother Matthews, and say one or the other?
You could file a petition and ask a judicial officer to consider both, but they're going to consider them separately as separate issues.
Right.
And then they're not going to take them up, or one's not going to affect the other in terms of how you file that petition. But you could file a petition and say, hey, I want to establish child support, or we have a lot of people that come and
is there a standard? I'm sorry.
Well, they're fathers, and they say, well, I want to establish parentage. I'm not on the birth certificate, and I want to put myself on child support. And so we have to first establish parentage, do DNA testing, which is a separate issue, and then child support is established once that parentage is established.
Who sets the rate for the child support payment?
So that
goes back to the judge.
To the judge.
So actually, that goes to the legislature.
Okay.
We are. Yeah.
So we'll put it on there.
Right.
Judge Calloway took too much money out of my pocket.
So what happens is we are bound by federal law on how much we are to set child support.
Right.
And each state has the right to choose what type of calculation they're going to use in order to set support. And we have chosen in Tennessee um, a shared income child support worksheet. And so what happens literally is when you come into the court for me to set child support, there's like 5 things I'm going to ask you.
All right.
First, I'm going to ask, how much time does each parent spend with their child? And so, for instance, if a father only spends every other weekend with their child, he gets about 80 days over the year, and the mother has about 285 days. And so I put that in the calculator, 285 versus 80.
Okay.
And then it says, how much does each parent earn? Let's say both of them earn minimum wage. Both of them about, $12.50 an hour. And so I'll put in how much they make each month, which is about $1,346.67 for minimum wage.
Okay.
She's really good at math, Ernie.
I know. I just thought maybe you take out 10% of my pay or up to 30%.
Back in the day, that's what they used to do. They took a percentage, but not anymore.
Wow.
It's all about calculations. And we literally put the numbers in. So what goes in there is the time that each parent spends, how much each parent's income, how much they make. And it's not good enough for you to come in and say, well, I'm not working right now, I'm in school, or I'm not working because of this. I will by law have to set you at a amount that I think you should be able to be paying, or that you should be able to make. So if you come in and you have a high school diploma and you're just happen to be chilling for the moment, then I have to set you at minimum wage and say, you probably could get a minimum wage job if you tried. So everyone has something that they're going to get set at for your income. And it's your gross.
I don't have a job and you still going to make me pay?
I'm going to set you at what the law says I have to do, which is impute your income at minimum wage. And
so juvenile court is more than just criminal cases.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why we're going through the steps here.
Absolutely.
The majority of what we do at juvenile court is not criminal.
Absolutely.
Civil.
All right. What if I'm given every other weekend for visitation? Can I appeal that for every weekend?
Absolutely. You can ask for whatever you want. And what the statute says is that for the judges, we are to set something that gives the parents as much time as possible with their child. And so for me, we should be starting at equal time, that each of you all should be having the same amount of time with your child as possible. That's what the law says. And so what happens is if for whatever reason you all are living in 2 different states, or, maybe somebody's here in Nashville still and somebody else is in Jackson, Tennessee, that I can't do equal time because the child's got to get to school every day, and so that would be difficult. But if
joint custody?
There can be joint custody, absolutely. And so that is a determination that we can make. And so if, y'all live 10 minutes from each other and both of you live 15 minutes from the school, and there's no harm or no reason that you can come up with other than you just don't like him anymore, that's not good enough for us not to set equal time. And so we'll set equal time the majority of time unless there's a good reason why we should not.
What other cases are you looking at, Lionel?
So Judge alluded to it. We have neglect and abuse dependent cases where child abuse may be involved or some type of neglect. That's 1/3 of the cases that we hear at juvenile court. In addition to child support, we talked about child support, custody, visitation. We talked about established parentage, which I brought up. Then you get into your status offenses and delinquency, which are 1/3 of the cases that we hear in juvenile court. So 1/3 is parentage cases, 1/3 may be neglect dependency, 1/3 of what we hear in juvenile court is going to deal with some type of delinquency or status offense. And Judge is better at explaining the difference between delinquency and status offense than I am.
All right, Judge.
I love it. Yes, absolutely. And, what I tell people a lot is if we did a better job of making sure that parents were properly parenting, not fighting about their children, working together, whether they're together or not, and not neglecting or abusing their children, our delinquency and status offense cases would be probably next to nothing.
Now we're talking about abuse. Can a child call the court system and say, I believe that my parent is is abusing me because I got a whipping last night or I was disciplined?
They can always call.
Okay.
There's going to be an investigation. Normally, the Department of Children's Services is the agency that is the investigator of abuse cases. And so whether if it's a child that's at school or whether it's a child in a parking lot or that's getting some type of a beating at the store or whether
Right.
it's, at the home or the hospital,
Can we
anybody
still chastise, or is that even the right terminology for it?
You can
Can
always
we can we
you can
can we discipline our child if they're acting up in Kroger
you
or any other
absolutely
store?
can discipline your child.
Right.
The issue is what is the line between discipline and abuse?
Hmm.
And sometimes that's a thin line. You know, there is not we are still allowed in Tennessee to use corporal punishment on our children.
All right.
But corporal punishment is not the same as abuse. And so
Okay.
what used to happen back in the day, particularly for our culture of people, where you were told to go out and get a switch and
Two
come
of
back
them.
in, two switches.
Or
And braid them
racetrack,
together. Yeah, or a
racetracks.
belt.
Yeah, whatever it
abuse.
is, a belt, a shoe, whatever it is.
My parents
more
would be
than
locked up
likely-
today.
more than likely,
Ah.
that would be and on the today's standard of
Right.
that would be abuse.
Okay. Now, what about a child saying, you cannot hit me? You cannot chastise
So
me.
there's
You
no-
cannot
there's-
discipline me. I'll call children's services on you.
The children can call, and
Yeah.
there'll be an investigation.
Right.
But the parents are allowed to do corporal punish.
And I know some parents that say, well, go ahead and call.
Yeah.
And when they get here, I'm still going to take this belt off on you.
Now, if you take the belt off, that may be the line between corporal punishment and abuse.
So we have to discipline our children between the ages of the time they're born until about 3 or 4 so they don't have a cell phone to call children's services. All right. You have made the point to city officials you need a new campus.
Absolutely.
What is the campus going to house? And why do
So-
you need a new campus?
We absolutely need a new campus for several different reasons. First and foremost, when they built the original juvenile court building that we are in now on Woodland Street, right next to the Nissan Titan Stadium,
Right.
it was too small to begin with.
Okay.
It was about 92,000 square foot, and at that time, it housed one elected judge and 2 magistrates. So there were 3 judicial officers. Since that time, and it was 92,000 square foot. Since that time, we now have 1 elected judge and 9 judicial officers because of the amount of business that we do now
Wow.
and the amount of different cases that we handle. So we have a lot more people that we serve and a lot more magistrates that need courtrooms that we don't have space for. So currently, 2 of our magistrates have to do court in a separate building because we don't have room for them in the building that we're currently in. And so also when we started, a lot of our auxiliary agencies that we work with, our partnering agencies like CASA, Department of Children's Services, District Attorney's Office, Public Defender's Office, Child Support Services Office, all of them had ample space in the building to help support the work that we do each and every day in court.
Will you be housing children?
We will be having a pretrial housing facility as well. So currently, let me go back to that other point. Ernie keeps jumping me up. I'm like, I don't think I
I'm
finished
trying to
that first
cover
thought.
everything in this amount of time that we have.
I got you. so
By the way, you're watching us on YouTube. You can answer questions to Metro Juvenile Court Judge Sheila Calloway or Metro Juvenile Court Clerk Lionel Matthews. He's been there for 5 years, and he can get you through the system.
So I'll go back. So
Yes.
the agencies that work with us that need to be in the building so they can directly work with our families and children had to move out as we continued to grow as a staff. And so now we're bringing them back. We're going to have them back as part of our Nashville Youth Campus for Empowerment. So to go back, yes, we will also have an area for our youth who we have determined based on a charge that they have committed that they need to wait for their trial while they're being detained in our facility. And so it's our pretrial housing facility. We're not housing kids who are found guilty of offenses or who, it's only for those children who have been charged with certain offenses that are very serious in nature, that we think that before they can go back into the community, they need to be housed here until they have their trial. And so on average, that's about 40 to 45 youth that we
Okay.
house. And so in the new facility that they'll have currently, where they're housed now, it looks like a jail. It's not very restorative. We have some agencies that come in and do a lot of work with our children, but the area that they're in is not very rehabilitative. And so we wanted to make it a place where even if you have to stay, and you have to stay for a period of time until you have your trial or until you're transferred to the adult system, whatever it is, we want to make sure that we're giving them every opportunity to grow and to be restored and to be rehabilitated.
City leaders have heard you, and you're breaking ground this year.
We're going to break ground this year.
Where will it be located?
So the property is on Brick Church Pike. I'm not sure.
1354 Brick Church Pike.
All right.
1354.
I know where that is.
I have the best partner in Londell.
There's a new Subaru dealership that was just built on Brick Church Pike near Trinity Lane. We're about 2 lots down from that Subaru dealership.
Okay, so Brick Church Pike and Trinity Lane area.
It's the former Almena Shrine Temple property.
Oh,
if you're
know exactly
with
where it is. What's going to happen to the old building?
It's going to become part of East Bank development.
Absolutely.
You're going to tear it down?
They're going to turn that down, tear it down, and make it part of the East Bank development. It'll probably
yeah, they'll probably be tearing it down at the same time they're tearing down the old Titan Stadium. So they'll probably demolish.
Nashville's moving on
at the same time.
Nashville's moving on, and we're going to have a terrific 14-acre lot where we're going to have a campus feel to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing about the new campus, Ernie, that I think is really important that Judge hadn't talked about is. And as a former council member, I used to hear this all the time because you have community concerns about kids that are brought to juvenile court and they're released back to their parents or back to the community. So they're non-detainable youth. And right now, police arrest a young person for they steal candy out of a store,
right,
and bring them down to the juvenile detention center, and they bring them through our intake and kind of take them through the process, but we can't detain them by law. State law says we can't detain them. There's nothing else we could do but call the parents and say, hey, you have to come pick your child up. Now they're cited, they're given a court date, and they probably come back to court if it's not diverted or dismissed, and those are some options that we do consider. But we should really be assessing those kids, and we should have a place where we can assess them and connect them with services and programs in the community to really get them the help that they need. On the new campus, we will have a 24-hour assessment center to do just that for non-detainable youth, that the police, if they pick them up, they can't go to our pretrial housing facility. It's not a serious crime that we could detain them for, but they can come to this assessment center. They can be assessed, and before we release them to the parents, we can make sure that we're connecting them with some nonprofit or some program in the community that's really going to address the core issue that brought them to our campus in the first place.
Let's address truancy. Are you working with education officials to cut it down?
Oh, we definitely are. We've been working with our education, Metro and Nashville Public Schools, and Dr. Battle and her team for since Dr. Battle's been there, but then years before that as well.
Yes.
We usually address them at our Metro Student Attendance Center, and that again is currently at a different building because we don't have room for them in the current building that we have. But what we have within our MSAC team is we have two workers that work with us, that they are actually paid by the Metro School Department, and they're like our liaisons. And so they're working with all of the teachers, all of the attendance review specialists, and everybody within the school to make sure that we are catching all the youth who are not in school. And
so we still have officers that are walking and patrolling the streets looking for children who are skipping school?
So we have a group of social work techs and a group of probation officers that provide service for those youth who aren't in school. And we don't necessarily walk around the community to say, hey, are you in school or not? But we work closely with the schools, and when we know of a child that's supposed to be in school and the school calls and said they're not here, then our team can definitely go out to check and see what's happening and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that they're connecting to school. We absolutely believe and know there are so many studies that have been done across the country and so many statistics that talk about if a child is engaged and connected with their school, there's less likelihood that they're going to end up in the criminal justice system. And so the reverse is so true, that youth who are suspended or expelled or skipping school have a much higher likelihood of ending up in the prison system. And so that's what they call the school to prison pipeline. It is absolutely true, and it's real.
Wow.
And so we work and that's why I, appreciate.
They're building prisons today for that child that's in the 3rd grade now.
That's what they claim. And so it is my, pleasure to first work with Dr. Joseph first and then Dr. Battle now, who have both been extraordinary, super helpful in making sure that their schools provide restorative justice opportunities for our youth. And so instead of just suspending and sending them back home or expelling and sending them back home, because when you suspend or expel and you send a kid back home and there's nobody home with them.
Because mom has to work 2 jobs.
Mom's got to work, or dad's got to,
They become a latchkey kid. Or
absolutely. They become.
Probably go to streets.
An idle mind is the
devil's workshop.
And so instead of doing that and suspending and expelling youth, what they're doing is they're doing restorative practices within the school. And so a child that's now in a fight that previously might have just gotten suspended or zero tolerance, they may have a youth court team that works with them and comes up with a better solution than suspension and expulsion for that youth to go through. Or they may have most of the schools now have a restorative justice room where a kid, if they're involved in or they're upset or they're involved in some type of conflict, they can ask for permission to go to the restorative room where they can calm down and gather themselves and be able to go back within the community of their school. And it's those things that we absolutely know are making a huge difference in the rate of suspensions and expulsions in the school systems, and they are making a difference. If we can keep kids in school every day, all day, and I know it's been a week that they have been out of it. I know there are a lot of parents are like, "Come, go back, go back." I think they've already announced that they may not even go tomorrow because I've seen some of these icy roads, and so I think they're not going back tomorrow. So it's going to be a good week that they've been out of school.
Yes,
but
yes, but I have 2 at my house.
Juvenile crime. That brings us to statistics. Is the crime rate going up or down for juveniles?
Nationwide, and particularly in Tennessee as well as Nashville, juvenile crime is actually going down.
Great.
And so there's like a big, for whatever reason, belief that there's just more kids out doing more crimes. And that is not true. We probably in Nashville were around, I will say since 2013, our juvenile crime has decreased about 70%. So in 2013, we were arresting about 4,700 kids at a time. In the end of 2020, that was about 1,560. At the end of 21, it was even lower. It was about 1,200. And we spiked up just a tad bit in 2023. We spiked up some, but we're still well under the numbers that we were in 2019, and we're definitely well under the numbers we were in 2013.
What type of crimes are you seeing?
The biggest crime that we see now is car thefts,
property crimes,
car thefts, and a lot of these cars that youth are stealing have guns in them.
Right.
And the police print out every week a Park Smart campaign where they tell us, please, please, please lock your doors when you leave, and please do not leave a gun in your car. don't leave your gun in your car, because what happens is, cars are parked at the mall, and there are some people who have left their car door open and their guns are in their car. And you have it's not just kids, it's kids and people who want to take cars are going around and checking
Yeah.
the car door
See
handles
what's in there.
and seeing what's in these
But we're
cars.
not seeing a spike in violent offenders.
We're not seeing a spike in
Good.
violent offenders, but we are seeing a spike in a lot of car thefts and gun.
I remember reading where Cameron Sexton, Speaker of the House, and of course a couple of the governors were just pushing legislation through to have a child tried as an adult. Of course, if they're over the age of 18, then they are adult. But up until 18, he was saying, let's take them and put them in and lock them up.
Yes.
Now, this is a big peeve of yours because incarceration rather than rehabilitation. Why are you so passionate about that?
I am very passionate about that. And I understand that there's a possible pending legislation. The legislature was out this week as well because of the ice and the snow across the state. But my understanding is that they are going to try and revive a law like that opens the gate for more youth to be tried as adults. It is very troubling to think that that's the answer to solving crime. There are so many studies that talk about how locking kids up, particularly during the time period where their brains are fully developing. And we know our kids' brains don't fully develop until they're about 25. When you lock them up in prisons or facilities that are designed for adults, what you're doing is you are shaping their brains in a negative way. And it actually is a physical thing that happens to their brain development. And you're influencing them in a way that actually hurts them more in their brain development, in their decision-making process. And so when that happens is when they get older, you've locked them up and they get, old enough to be released from prison at 30, 35, 40, they've grown up in a prison system and don't know how to survive or live in our communities. And that's where we see recidivism rates, where people are returning back to prison. And so what we are not doing for them is affording them an opportunity to have true rehabilitation services at the absolute time when their brain is developing, when they need it the most. Prison for youth does not work. And so what we absolutely have seen and see that works is if we are providing them with true rehabilitation services, whether that's with the Department of Children's Services or whether that's out in community with community services wrapping them around. They do not come back when we give them the proper services that they need. And it's hard. People, we are so used to, as a society, as just our answer is, well, if somebody does something wrong, they need to just get locked up and do the crime.
I've heard some parents say, I cannot do anything with this child. You take them or you take her and throw away the key. But that's not the solution.
That is not the solution.
Right.
And when you think about where America is in the world on incarceration rates, we are one of the highest countries in incarceration rates. And so what you would say, well, if we lock everybody up, and that's our answer to what community safety should be, then we should have the safest country in the world. We do not. We do not have the safest country, and incarceration is not the answer to making us more safe. If we look at countries like New Zealand and Switzerland and other places where, they have nice sized populations and they have people that commit crimes, they don't have a lot of recidivism, because when they do, they absolutely do a restorative justice type programs, things that actually help people to understand what they've done, hold people accountable, but give them the resources and the things that they need to have a better place in our community. And so community safety does not equal punishment lockup.
Juvenile crime. Should we lock them up, incarcerate, or rehabilitate? Our guest is Metro Juvenile Court Judge Sheila Calloway and Metro Juvenile Court Clerk Lionel Matthews. Your thoughts on it, Brother Matthews?
Well, I think about something that happened recently with the juvenile court judge, the former juvenile court judge in Rutherford County, or neighboring county to the south of Davidson County, where they were putting young people, and some of them were below the age of 12, I believe, that were involved in this altercation. But they were putting them in detention and holding them. It made national news, and there's a fabulous podcast about it. But the thing that they're trying to do at the legislature now with automatic transfer of certain charges to the adult system is really giving people that think the way that judicial officer in the state of Tennessee thought, the ability to say we should be tough on kids. We should be tough on kids. We should lock them up. We should isolate them, which is judges already talked about isolation and what that does with idle minds. We should isolate them, and we should just wish the problem goes away. And it doesn't work like that. I mean, you can't isolate a kid. You can't expect them to magically come back better if you haven't provided the services, if you hadn't done anything to really help them to learn. Then they're not going to come back just magically better. If you suspend a kid, you expel a kid out of school, they're going to come back to school eventually. And when they come back, they're not going to be a better kid if you haven't taught. We don't teach kids how to be better. We expect them to learn it from other people or other places. And we can't, our community, especially the Black community, really can't afford to expect other people or other communities to teach our kids how they should.
And we have heard 1,000 times, it takes a village.
It does.
It takes a village to bring up a child. And of course, we need to find solutions. And one of the things, what about peer pressure or peer counseling? Have you looked into that as well?
So we do a program called Youth Court in 6 of our high schools.
All right.
And if it were up to me and Dr. Battle, they'd be in all of our high schools.
Right.
And we're working towards that goal. And what the Youth Court are doing, it's a court of their peers. And if a child has committed an offense, a low-level misdemeanor offense in the community, then they can choose to have their court heard by their school youth court. And we train all of the students to be a part of the youth court. They serve as attorneys for the child who has committed the offense. They serve for attorneys for the state. They serve as the court officer, the caseworker or probation officer. They serve as the clerk, as well as the jury. So they have all of the positions in a courtroom except for the judge.
Okay.
And the judge is either me or a magistrate or an attorney, one of the local attorneys that we give permission to be the judges for the youth court. And it's a wonderful program, and it helps to hold the child accountable and to absolutely understand what they've done and to put them on the right track and to have their peers to support them and to help them through the process. We've had wonderful stories. There was a youth at Whites Creek one year who was actually the respondent and I can't remember what his crime was. I think it might have been a shoplifting. And his case went to the youth court system, and he got a little frustrated with his attorneys and said, I could represent them better than this. And so the next year he said, I want to be a part of the youth court.
What about the repeat offender? And they're saying to themselves, they're not going to do anything. I can go break into this car. I can go break in here. I can go do this. I can do that. Because the laws are lenient for juveniles. Should we toughen the laws? Should we give them a little taste, maybe a week in detention?
So absolutely not.
All right. I know. Of course, we're talking about incarceration versus rehabilitation.
Absolutely. Right. There is a false perception that a whole lot of kids are just running around and doing this over and over again.
Yeah.
There is a very small percentage of our youth who get in trouble that are repeat offenders. I will say, for instance, of our youth who get in trouble that we divert their cases from the system the first time around, there's about a literally in a 2-year process, where we diverted about 1,000 youth from our system, about 6% came back for additional charge. That's a very low number. When you look at the youth that have gone to the prison system, and once they've gotten out, their recidivism rate is much higher. It's maybe like around the 40, 50 percentile. And so you're talking about the difference of this clearly points to the understanding that incarceration doesn't help with community safety or people coming back into the system. Those people aren't getting what they need to learn how to adjust to living in our society while they're in a jail or in a prison. But when we're working with them, holding them accountable, making sure that they understand why they got in trouble,
Right.
what they did wrong,
Right.
and what they can do to be better the next time.
So what do you
They're
do
not
when you
coming
get
back.
when you get a child that comes to your court who perhaps, let's say, pulled a gun on someone, shot him in the foot? Oh, it went off accidentally. What do you do to that child?
You know, it depends on what they're charged with. In that kind of case, they're probably charged with an aggravated assault.
Okay.
That is one of those cases that are detainable. And so that child would more than likely be detained in our pretrial housing facility until they have their trial. And so it would depend on
The offense?
it depends on the offense. It depends on whether or not they have been in
Because
trouble
we
before.
know that if it's aggravated, they have a weapon.
Absolutely.
And if
correct.
they use a weapon in an offense,
Correct.
then that's when you look at that thin line and say, well, do I need to send this one to jail?
Yes. And so
Or send this one to rehab?
there is
So
a
judge doesn't send kids to jail.
Correct.
She needs to clarify if a kid is adjudicated, what happens.
Right.
So in the juvenile
Special guest
system,
Lionel Matthews, ladies. Co-host for today.
I love it.
My man.
So if a child is first, if they're charged and it's a serious offense, there is a weapon involved.
Okay.
More than likely, they're going to be held in our detention. They're going to be detained in our pretrial housing facility until their next court date.
Right.
At their next court date, there could be a number of things that could happen, and it depends on what the person who was harmed, the victim, wants to happen. It depends on what the district attorney decides on, or what they're asking for, or what the child's record is, how the child's doing in the community already, whether they've been in trouble before, whether they have good school attendance and doing well. All of those things make a difference on how we're going to handle that case. And so, what the ultimate decision could be is that child cannot be rehabilitated in the juvenile system, and that child would have to go to the adult system to be rehabilitated. That's a decision that I would make as the judge. And by the current statute, there is a list of about 6 to 7 things that I have to look at to make a determination of whether or not that child can no longer be rehabilitated in the juvenile system and has to be sent to the adult system. So that's the ultimate thing.
Right.
And
So
then
we're
there's some
looking
things in
at
between.
changing a child's mind, and hopefully that modifies his behavior.
Absolutely. And so it's like a lot what Lionel was saying earlier is when we just put them in prison, lock them up, and we
Right.
don't teach them how to change their behaviors, they don't have the opportunity to learn that. We have to have an opportunity to teach them. And so the other option that we have is if we don't feel like they can learn how to change their behaviors while they're in the community, then, and I don't think it's serious enough to send to the adult system, then they would go to the Department of Children's Services custody as a juvenile justice child, and it would be up to DCS to make a determination on where they should be placed and what type of program they should be involved in to help with that rehabilitation process. And they can be in the DCS's custody from as little as 4 to 6 months up to 1 to 2 years, however long it takes for the rehabilitation process to go into effect.
Juvenile crime. Should we rehabilitate or incarcerate? Our guest, Metro Juvenile Court Judge Sheila Calloway and Metro Juvenile Court Clerk Lionel Matthews. We are live on YouTube, and we have a question, Judge. And Ms. Long wants to know what or how bad does the crime need to be in order for jail or prison to be an immediate consequence, especially if they are around 17 or 18 years old?
You know,
And thank you, Ms. Long.
yeah, thank you for that question. I appreciate that. And that's kind of what we were just talking about.
Right.
It definitely is going to be dependent on the crime. Normally, if a child is alleged to have committed a very serious crime like murder, very serious aggravated robbery, where someone was hurt or someone was a big threat of hurt by a weapon, those are typically the cases where the district attorney asks for that child to be transferred to the adult system. Um, those are the cases, and we always have to recognize this is a court system. And so there's due process rights that anybody, whether you're a youth or you're an adult, have to have an opportunity to have due process to make a determination of whether they're guilty or not guilty. Part of that due process right is everybody in the adult system has the ability to make bond on a case. In the juvenile system, they don't get a right to have a bond. And so a lot of times when we talk about these automatic transfer cases and sending kids straight to the adult system, if they are alleged to have committed, let's say, a murder case, and it goes to the adult system has a right to have a bond set in their case. In the juvenile system, if they're still in the juvenile system, they will remain in our pretrial housing facility, and they don't get that same right to have a bond, but they'll remain there until their case is resolved. And so when you talk about an immediate time for prison, that doesn't happen anywhere.
I remember there was a case years ago, you may remember. The child was 11, 12, or 13 years old, committed a murder. A guy stopped at a traffic signal. The young person walked up, pulled out a gun, shot him, and he was convicted of murder. And there was a big debate, should he go to the prison system rather than to the rehab system?
Yeah, I remember that case. If it's the same case you're talking about, is back in 1998, I believe. Yeah. And he was 12 years old at the time that he committed the offense.
Right.
And he was with an older youth who actually was the person who gave him the gun and said, shoot this guy. There were a lot of other circumstances behind that. He did end up going into the adult system, but what they were able to work out, because he was so young, instead of him physically going to the adult system when he was 12, he stayed in the Department of Children's Services custody until he turned 18, and then he was transferred to the adult system to serve out the rest of his sentence.
Gotcha.
And so,
what do you think about gang members or alleged gang members recruiting young people to commit a crime, knowing that if they get caught, they may not get a severe punishment?
You know,
do we have a gang problems, or is it all gone? Well, that's a question we're going to ask the chief. He's going to be our next guest.
We do have gangs in our community.
All right.
And anytime you think about a gang, that's a group of people that are gathering to do negative behaviors. That is not a good thing.
Right.
We much rather have our youth be involved in positive groups that are doing positive things, like
sports,
like
athletics,
sports and athletics,
right. Music programs. I mean, being involved in after-school programs or out-of-school time programs, Boys and Girls Club. There are dozens of them around the city, but the adults that are basically encouraging young people to commit crimes for them. I mean, it's a disgusting thing. But you also have to think that young minds are impressionable, and they're going to look to adults for guidance, for mentorship, regardless of whether they're a good adult or bad adult. We need to make sure that there are more good adults that are involved in young people's lives, whether you're a coach, whether you're a mentor through a school program or through a nonprofit, whether you're providing some type of tutoring, whether you're providing some type of learning of some type of service. People teach people how to play guitar or piano. Like, a young person needs to be involved in something outside the classroom and outside of the home that's extracurricular every 100% of our young people need to be involved in something.
Right. You remember the old saying, idle wine is the devil's workshop?
It is.
Keep them busy.
It is.
Yeah.
There's been a complaint. There's not enough.
Okay, can I go back to that real quick?
Sure.
I just want to give a shout out to my partner in justice, Lionel Matthews. He is one of the hardest working men in this Justice Department.
Everywhere.
You know, he talks about all of his hard work that he does each and every day at the clerk's office.
Mm-hmm.
But he is also one of the leaders of My Brother's Keeper.
All right.
And with his program as My Brother's Keeper that started with Obama, and we have a prong of it here in Nashville.
Yes.
But he and a group of men once a month, not more than that, go and read to children in the school system. And so he takes his time out of his day to set aside to make sure that he's being that good example and teaching them how to be in good groups. You know, they go and they teach young men how to tie ties and read books to them and all these kind of things. Being a mentor.
Yeah.
And he has the time to do it along with his two young children.
Tell me about the program.
I appreciate that, Judge Calloway. So My Brother's Keeper started by President Obama when he was in the White House. It's now housed under the Obama Foundation out of Chicago, but it's a nationwide initiative. Nashville is part of 250 cities that have committed to the My Brother's Keeper work of increasing the achievement gap for boys and young men of color, so Black and brown boys. I co-chair our steering committee here in Nashville, along with Ashford Hughes, who is the Executive Officer of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Metro Schools. We have a great steering committee. We partner with the Urban League of Middle Tennessee. They're our backbone organization now, and so they're helping to staff and make sure that we're able to scale up and expand our work. But we last year we partnered with 4 schools. We went into each of those schools once a month, reading to students and making sure that there's a direct correlation between literacy and involvement with the juvenile justice system.
So if anyone wants to get in touch with you and the organization, can they call you at the office?
Reach out to me at the office. You can follow MBK, has social media handles at MBK Nashville on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're always posting volunteer opportunities. But you could call me directly and we could discuss and we could talk about ways that you could either get involved or partner or collaborate with us.
All right. My hat's off to you, sir. Word to the wise, Judge, and so we can stop the prison, the pipeline or the pipeline to prison syndrome. What can we tell parents to keep their child looking forward?
Wonderful question. You know, one of the things that we want to stress to parents, first and foremost, there usually are we need to build our village back. Both parents need to be involved in the child's life. I don't care what he did to you or what she did to him. That has to be set aside so that you can have a united front in making sure that you're raising your child to the best that they can be. There are things called adverse childhood experiences. And one of those adverse childhood experiences is parents who are separated or divorced. And when they're fighting with each other about the child or through the child, that changes the way that child's brain develops. And so we have to stop doing that. We've got to get along for our child.
Right.
And then
it's taking a village.
It takes that village. And so, you know, we have so many like grandparents that come in or aunties that come in and are trying to take away the kid. And, you know, let's work together, help lift those parents to help them learn how to take care of their children. Work together so we can make sure that our children are getting the best they can.
Metro Juvenile Court Judge Sheila Calloway, who is also the first Black African-American woman to hold their position. Congratulations to you.
I was the first Black to hold it, period. And now there's 2 of us now. Me
Black
and
History right here.
Yes.
Before Black History Month.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Also, Metro Juvenile Court Clerk Lionel Matthews, thank you, sir. We look forward to you serve 5. We look forward to another 5.
Yes, sir.
And another 20 years for you, Judge. And you both have an open invitation to come back.
No, thank you
so much.
We appreciate it.
All right. Juvenile crime in Metro, leading the way with Calloway. That still should be the campaign slogan.
Absolutely.
We're dealing with crime here in the city on the next show. And then we'll have Metro Police Chief John Drake as our guest. So join us then here on our new podcast, 92qnashville.com. Let's talk. And, of course, as always, remember to respect your father and your mother, love your brother, and teach your sister how to be a lady. Until the end, it's been our pleasure. We hope it's been yours. Thank you for joining.
You've been listening to Let's Talk with your host, Ernie Allen. The views and opinions expressed on Let's Talk do not necessarily represent the position of this radio station or management on the subject matter. Let's Talk is a presentation of the News and Public Affairs Department of 92Q. Check out this and previous Let's Talk shows online at 92qnashville.com.